Thank you so much for being here. I don't know how many people this is. I'm thinking like 150 or so. Would that be about right? When we first started organising this event, and thank you to Jackie, Belinda, Katrina, and Cassie also who helped out, we were talking about 40 to 50 people. And so when I heard the latest number, I'm going, what? There was a side of me that was really excited. Of course, I didn't show it overtly because I'm more of an introvert, right? So, but inside I was like, yes, this is great. On the other hand, there was also the nervousness coming up, going, oh my God, this is quite high expectations. So my daughter, who's 11 years old, she has a new word for me. She says, use the word nerve-sighted. And that's how I felt when I first heard the number, and I thought, oh, it's exciting and it's also nerve-wracking at the same time. It's especially knowing that, I am naturally a quieter person. So being at the centre of attention is like, oh my God, it's not something that I enjoy particularly. But I have gotten used to it, and that's part of the story that I wanted to share with you. So Quietly Powerful was born about a little bit over 12 months ago. And it's got a bit of a history in that one of the reasons why I started it was because of my own story, but the other reason was because as a leadership and culture consultant, I felt that the definition of leadership was a bit limited. And when I say the definition, it's not the intellectual definition, because there's plenty of leadership books and research out there. Did you know that there's like 2,000 books on leadership written every year, or maybe more? So there's heaps and heaps of things written, except that even if they talk about servant leadership or that soft power or different styles of leadership that's useful, I think emotionally or unconsciously we still have a bias towards more of that heroic alpha kind of leadership. And I felt a little disturbed by that as a quieter person being in the leadership and culture field. Anyway, so first up, I'd like to ask you a question. Could you please talk to someone nearby and talk to them about what comes to mind when we describe a person as quiet? 1 minute, quick brainstorm. Off you go. Yeah. You're not very quiet in this room. You're pretty noisy, actually. So please tell me what sort of words came out in terms of, when you say somebody's quiet, what comes out?
Thoughtful.
Thoughtful.
Shy.
Shy. Timid. What was that?
Passive.
Sorry?
Good listeners.
Good listeners.
Passive.
Passive.
Compliant.
Compliant. There was another one.
Confident.
Not confident.
Not confident.
Yeah, yeah.
Controlled.
Controlled, yeah, okay.
Introvert.
Introvert. Anything else?
Insecure.
Yeah, insecure, not confident, similar. Any others?
Strong as well. Yeah.
Can be strong.
With the silence, they don't have to feel the void.
Yeah, they don't have to fill the void, for sure, yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, because not many of us think of quiet equals powerful. Would that be fair? Why not? Yeah, so your point of they can be really strong. So the question for all of us, and I'm interested, some of you might have come because you are naturally quieter and you wanted to learn a bit more about how you can be powerful. Some of you may already be putting on a very brave, confident, extrovert face, and maybe you're exhausted. Some of you may be extroverted but actually want to learn more about being quietly powerful. Who knows? I've had such a range of people attracted to this topic. So whatever you're here for, please ponder this whole notion that there's a belief that quiet doesn't equal powerful, because we can challenge that. I know people, and I know that there's at least 3 of them in the room in here who are senior people and very powerful in a positional sense, but also in their presence and how they interact with people, who are naturally quieter. I heard about that within EY, but I also know of other people who are quietly powerful. So they do exist. Quietly powerful leadership does exist. So that's what we're going to be talking about. And just to think, this is the picture that came up when I typed in leadership in Pixabay, which is a photo. This is the first picture that popped up. And I think this is why, we're conditioned to think that leaders are like that, and not too many of us look like that, I don't think. At least the colour's wrong. Yeah? Okay, so with that, I think our beliefs around leadership needs a bit of an update, and I recently wrote an article on that. I only posted it like a day or two ago. And I'm doing quite a bit of research around what is leadership really, and there's a little bit about that in my LinkedIn article if you want to look it up. So why did I choose to do it? Well, that's me when I was about 4. Yes, I was pretty cute. And my mother said, so what happened? So yes, as you probably can tell from my name, I am Japanese by background. Parents are Japanese. I was born in Melbourne though, so I'm actually Australian. But as a Japanese child growing up, when I was younger, I did stay in Japan for a while as well. Even amongst the Japanese, who are typically a little quieter, would you say? Yeah, generally, it's a generalisation. There are very loud Japanese people as well, and some crazy ones on TV, I'm sure you've seen them. So there are those, but generally speaking, fairly reserved and quiet. And even amongst them, I was one of the quieter ones. So naturally, I'm a fairly quiet person and love my own company and all of that. But unfortunately, as I went into my career, I started off in management consulting. Imagine that. You can't, I felt, that was my belief, I couldn't be the quieter self while I was in that role. And so I put on the suit, the high heels, the red jacket, or whatever it took for me to look confident and look like I knew something. I absolutely had the imposter syndrome. By the way, did you know that most people have an imposter syndrome? It's quite interesting. A lot of people do. They may not admit it, but a lot of us do. So anyway, that made me feel better when I heard it anyway. So as a consultant, I felt like I had to put on that face, but it totally exhausted myself. In fact, I burnt out. And I changed careers quite dramatically in about, I can't remember what year, but I was about 30. I did a 180-degree turn from doing strategy, economics, financial performance analysis, that kind of work, to leadership and culture and people. And I thought, I really love that field, and so I thought I would jump into that. And the only reason why I jumped into that was because I really loved the topic, because what I didn't realise to the extent that it happened was it required me to be in front of groups all the time, as you can see. So that was early on in my leadership and culture career. And it was hard because I was nervous, I wasn't that skilled at talking, and I just found myself getting really, having butterflies in my stomach and all of those things. But over time I learned skills, I got trained a lot, and so I was okay. But even about 5 years ago, so I've been doing that for 16 years, even 5 years ago I had this moment. And I have to say that was about the turning point where I was co-facilitating with a colleague who was really, really extroverted. The types that just stand up and make you laugh every 2 minutes? And I was co-facilitating with this person who kicked off the workshop. I'm sitting waiting for my turn, and he's getting the whole group laughing, and I was sitting going, oh, I don't do that. I know my stuff, but I'm not that way of, I don't present and facilitate that way. So I was feeling quite inadequate in a way in that particular context, even though I was pretty skilled. I've been doing it for, more than 10 years. And then I stood up and did my thing, and I did okay. I knew my thing, I knew my stuff. But one of the clients who was sitting in the room, who knew me really well, came up to me during the break and said to me, Megumi, what's going on? You're not yourself today. And I said, well, I was just feeling a bit inadequate because of my colleague. And she said, Megumi, what are you talking about? The fact that you're different from your colleague is what makes you valuable. Stop saying that to yourself and just be the full self that you can be. And that was a turning point in the context of me really owning and acknowledging my quieter style and combining that with the skills that I've learnt over the years. So that was really the beginning. Anyway, so many more years later, I've been presenting a lot more as well, and I have found that I've been combining a lot more of my quieter nature as well as my learnt skills. And I had a really interesting feedback at a presentation I did at a leadership forum, I think it was, in a firm. And the feedback was, you know, Megumi, it was fantastic how you spoke and engaged with the group compared to a person who came a month before on the similar leadership forum. Not that neither was wrong or bad, but it was great to see the difference because the other person was the extrovert entertainer type of person and you were quieter, and what you did was you actually involved everyone in the conversation. So that was the feedback, and I thought, oh, okay, it's working. So I was feeling quite good, and I started experimenting more and more with that combination, and I continued to get useful and positive feedback. So that's how I've been learning and growing and developing how I operate. So my invitation to you and offer to you is to start thinking about how could you honour and value that quieter side and bring that more to the fore, because there's some real value in it. So, did you notice how I engaged you right from the beginning too? I got you talking. Part of it is because I wanted my attention away from me. Right, so there's one. But of course, that's just my natural style, and that seems to work, so that's why I also do it too. So I'm going to engage you once again. People are standing up. I normally do this as a stand-up, sit-down exercise, but that's not going to work. So could you please raise your hand if you agree with the questions that pop up? And I know that I think Jackie, when she introduced, might have asked some of the questions, but it'll be interesting to see whether this is the case for you. First up, who finds networking difficult and exhausting? Hands up. About 95% of the room, I think. It's yeah, that's about similar to the survey that I've done with the people that I've invited to various breakfasts. About 95% people say, yep, it's exhausting. Second one, self-promotion is difficult and awkward. Oh, wow, I think there's more of them. Okay. Third one, get frustrated by talkers who get ahead. And the last one, feel that being quiet is a disadvantage in your career. Okay, so a bit of a mix at the end there. So based on the survey that I did, what I have found is that 91% felt like they had to be extroverted to progress in their careers. That's a pretty significant number, I thought. So part of it is that I think they feel like they see that the people who are visible are demonstrating those behaviours. And I also know that quieter leaders who do put on the more extrovert style or way, that they're more visible, and therefore you may not even know that actually naturally they're quieter as well, so that can happen. Another one that was interesting was 83% can only think of 3 or less quieter women in senior leadership roles around them. Yeah, so not many. I think the number was still about 70% if you went down to 2 or under. So it's pretty significant. So there's also gender and the style thing going on in there. Interestingly, 56% was the number when I asked the question around men. So men have a slight, maybe a lot, advantage, even as a quieter professional. So I just thought that was interesting. Does that ring a bell? Question? Not sure. What's the reaction to that? Yes, kind of. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. So I know many of you will be reflecting and you may not say much. That's okay. I understand. So what I wanted to share though, primarily, this is to me the key thing that I really wanted to encourage you to reflect on. That is the challenge that most of us are not even aware of. So absolutely, the environment may cause us to feel like, you know, you have to be extroverted to get ahead and etc. That may ring true in the context of the work environment. And some companies probably more than others, and I'm guessing some countries more than others. There has been some research around that too. But what happens though is this is some of the messaging that happens. Have you ever been told this one? Oh really? Surely you're not an introvert. Have you had that one? You've had that one? Yeah. I have, especially doing a lot of facilitation, because you know I do speak in front of groups, and so people come up to me when I've shared that I'm actually quite quiet and introverted. They come and say that. What do you think the message behind that though is? Yeah, there's something wrong with being an introvert or quiet or whatever the case may be. Can you see that? There's a little bit of a put down. Here's another one. Isn't she great? She's so bubbly and fun. Meaning, if you're not bubbly and fun, you're not great. There's a little bit of a put down there. There's another one. He's quite an introvert and shy, and he's not that great with people. Yeah, again, see that little put down? You need to be visible and speak up more. That's often a comment that quieter people get. How many of you have had that one before? I have, lots of times. This is an interesting one. I read this in an article. I'm lucky I'm an extrovert. So the article, it was in the context of networking, and I actually know the person who wrote it, and I totally get where she was coming from, that she feels comfortable being with people, and therefore I'm lucky I'm an extrovert in the networking context. But can you hear the little put down underneath it? You're unlucky if you're an introvert, is the message behind that. So there's another one that I heard from quite an extroverted senior manager. They're really introverted over there. Actually, it was an IT firm. They need help to talk to each other, so we've made it all open plan and, you know, made sure that they actually sit together. And so I heard that literally, and I just sat there going, serious? So again, a put down about being quieter, introverted, etc. And the problem with all of these messages, and there's plenty of other ones if you really think about it, societally, workplace, wherever it might be, the problem is this is what happens. We internalise those messages, and we become quite critical of our quieter nature, our introvert nature. And so this is in the psychology world called internalised marginalisation. So I'm sure you've heard of marginalisation, but actually this is about we put ourselves down because we've internalised the messages that's been coming in from the outside. Can anyone relate to that? How many of you know that you've got voices saying, oh, you've got to speak up more. Don't be so quiet. You know, who's had those little critical voices that keep on saying to yourself, whatever, yeah? So that's the internalised marginalisation in action. And if we don't, oftentimes we don't even realise that's what's going on. And so this is going on in the background, and so we keep putting ourselves down, and therefore we keep on feeling like we're not as good as others or inadequate. And I also wrote another article which you may be interested in, I know many people were interested in, called Don't Stop, no, what did I call it? Don't tell me to be more confident. Because it makes it worse. If you tell me to be more confident, you're telling me I'm not confident, and then the spiral goes into, oh my God, so I don't look confident, so therefore I'm not good enough, and so then it spirals into, can you see how that happens? So that is this process of internalised marginalisation, which is really challenging because we start to feel like there's something wrong with us. And unfortunately, when that happens and it keeps happening, we end up with what Benjamin Disraeli says, where most people die with their music still locked up inside. You know, we've got our special music, we've got our unique way of being, and it just gets locked in because we think that it's not right. And for me, the reason why I keep on doing this, even though I don't like the attention and all of this, is that I don't want people to have their music locked up inside. So what I wanted to share with you is the challenge that we're faced with and some of the things that you may potentially try out to see if you can uncover and work with some of these challenges that we might face. Maybe have a quick chat. Does that resonate? What are your thoughts based on what you've heard so far? Quick chat to the person other side, if you can. Thanks, everyone. Thank you. You are really noisy, by the way. So I won't ask you to share this because I think it's quite a deeper conversation, and so I don't think it's more of a public sort of conversation, but something to reflect on and think about, what have I internalized? And it's conditioning. You know, when you think about it, there's conditioning from when we're growing up as a, you know, I've got a few, if you like, triple whammy of being Asian, Japanese, and a woman, and what was the third? Oh, and being quieter. So I've got a triple whammy in terms of, you know, ceilings and whatever you want to call it. Also, when I was younger, I can't say that anymore, but when I was younger, I did have that another ceiling of age. And so what I wanted to share is a few lessons I've learnt along the way, and also what I've developed in terms of how you might start to address some of these challenges. So a few lessons. First one, faking till you make it will burn you out and it's not worth it. I've really taken this on more recently, especially as I said, I'm not that young anymore. When I went past 40, I feel like I've grown this particular muscle that seems to grow. It's the only one that seems to grow. There's nothing else that grows. And it's the I don't give a toss muscle. You got that one? Yeah. And I think it kind of started growing when I was 40. So, so some of you who are younger than 40, see if you can grow it and nurture it a little earlier. Because I wish I had it earlier, in fact. I really do. Because it's not worth it, and it's also can be picked up from other people, in the sense that when I was very early on in my facilitation training, I have had feedback to say that, oh, Megumi, you're just putting on that really fun, energetic face. And I thought I was working really hard to do my job, and I got told that. I was so disappointed. So it can come through, and so yeah, it's really not. The thing is though, there is a difference between faking and growing. Sometimes you do have to put on something different to learn something. Would you agree? Yeah. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going, you know, like my speaking, the first few years was very uncomfortable. But because the big difference between faking and growing was that I really wanted to learn it. Because I loved the work and I really wanted to take it on myself, even though it was uncomfortable. For me, that's growing. If I was doing it because somebody else told me that I have to me, that's faking. Does that make sense? So that's what I've learned. Just be yourself is not necessarily useful either. So I may be contradicting myself here, but I'm really not. It's kind of two ideas that are seemingly contradictory, but actually they come together. In that, if I just listened to the voice of just be yourself, I would not be standing on this stage. I would be home in Melbourne in my study writing. That's all I would do, right? But the reality is, my passion and my mission with this work is to spread the word and help people, as many people as possible, and also challenge this whole idea of what leadership looks like. So it's like I cannot not do it. So that's why I'm here. So just be yourself is not always useful. And quietly powerful leadership already exists. I've mentioned that briefly before. Have a look at these faces. They're mostly famous people. Do any of them surprise you? Obama surprises you? Why is that? Sorry?
Was he quiet?
He's got amazing, eloquent speaking abilities, right? But when I read up on him, he spends any time after dinner with his family to midnight, past midnight, whatever, on his own, in his study, and does whatever he wants to do by himself. That's how he re-energizes himself. So in terms of where he gets energy from, it's from being by himself. So it's an introversion trait, if you like, yeah? So that's interesting. Anyway, so there are examples of this, and I think what is showing here is that quietly powerful leaders have that quieter nature and they have the ability to flex where needed. And I think that's going to be the key. And part of that is that my lesson was that I can, and we can, choose not to be limited by our conditioning. The conditioning or the internalised marginalisation that I mentioned earlier. Because we can actually start to become aware of them, and once you're aware of them, you can actually do something with it. The worst thing is that we're not aware of it, and therefore it runs our behaviours, and we can't do anything about it. So what I thought I'd share is just some strategies that might help you to start to think about how you address that. Does that sound useful for you? So this is a framework I've developed over time in terms of thinking about how to address it, and that is looking at what's the key to the quiet power, and I put it down as appreciating fully and adapting purposefully are the two key things that I thought of. Appreciating fully is about appreciating all of ourselves, the strengths that we call our strengths, as well as what we call our weaknesses, and valuing them as well. So it's the full being comfortable with yourself thing, comfortable in your own skin, including some of the faults and weaknesses, so-called weaknesses. And I say so-called because so-called weaknesses, I'll mention why in a moment. The other side is adapting purposefully. I think if we only just appreciate ourselves, it's back to that question, the comment about just be yourself is not that useful. So that adapting is also useful. And what I found is if you don't do either, you're in a place of shrinking, if you like, where you're not really stretching yourself and you don't feel really great about yourself either. So that's not a very helpful place to be. If you get to a place of appreciating yourself fully, and I think, over 40s, it gets a bit easier because you don't give a toss so much. So you go, well, this is who I am. Just take it or leave it. Do you know people like that? Just go, well, this is just who I am. If you don't like it, well, so be it. And that's not necessarily useful either. It's limiting in that you've narrowed your range of behaviours, and therefore you aren't able to flex either. And if you've got something that you want to achieve and you don't have that flex, then that also limits you. Well, there's the other side where if you keep on adapting, and this was me earlier in my career, where I kept going on to professional development sessions, training, presentation training, etc., a long list of training, and I had not worked on appreciating myself fully, and therefore I felt fake at times, as well as other people were picking up on the fact that perhaps I'm not fully being myself. And the final piece, if you can get both of them working, adapting as well as appreciating, that's when you can start to thrive. You're integrating what you have naturally as well as what you're learning and growing, and continuing to get outside the comfort zone purposefully. And I underline purposefully, so that you're doing it for good reason, you're doing it for you, not because someone else told you to. And the processes that I wanted to share a little bit about the processes I use. I've been running public programs and coaching programs and a whole range of things, and this is what I use in terms of how we go about the development. And the appreciating fully side starts with understanding ourselves in terms of what our natural tendencies are, and also understanding those conditioning, internalised marginalisation, the voices that we've carried in our minds, and really understanding that so you can actually deal with it. The other part also is reframing. And this is what I said earlier about the so-called weaknesses. For a long time, I did think that my quieter, reserved nature was a weakness. And I think many of you mentioned that they could be a disadvantage. Notice how many people put their hands up. So if you could start to reframe quiet as being, I think the lady at the front, the second row, you mentioned about being strong and being able to hold the silence. I mean, how many of you have been in negotiations or conversations when somebody held silence? Have you ever been in those? What's the impact of that? It's very powerful. It can make the other uncomfortable. Or, I know in a coaching context, if I can hold it in a very compassionate way, it can be very, very empowering. So it's a very powerful ability you can use. So if you can, so the reframing is that. It's not just about the quiet, but if there are weaknesses that you feel you have, see if you can reframe it where it's useful, find what's useful about them, because often they become your greatest differentiators. They become your unique differentiators. Thirdly, leverage them. So find places where you can use them and weave it into your work so that you can bring more of your natural tendencies, your natural strengths and so-called weaknesses into your work. The other side, adapting purposefully. The key things that I find helpful and have the people that I've coached have found useful is, first thing, getting a little clearer on your mission. And mission can be the little mission of, I want to get this project done really well so the clients are happy. It could be a very immediate mission, or it could be the bigger life mission. What am I about? What am I here for? You know, who am I? What am I contributing to the world? So it could be that too. So there's a big range. The reason why it's important to have a mission is that guides your adaptation, your flexing. Does that make sense? Because otherwise you're faking. So the mission is important. The other one is learning some adjustments. So many of you put your hand up around networking. How many of you have some little strategies for networking? Because you have to do it. Yeah? What are some of yours?
Always team up with a more extroverted person.
Team up with extroverts. Excellent. Nice strategy. Anyone else? Got a thumbs up there. Do any of the others have a little trick? No? Yeah?
I work with topics.
Sorry?
I find a topic we can relate to.
Yes, yes.
So it's sports and going.
Yeah, find common ground. Yeah. Absolutely.
Until you find one that it works, and
Yeah.
then the person will start talking.
Yeah, that's right.
And then I don't have to talk.
Exactly right. Yeah. Related to that is ask questions. You take the attention off yourself, and then they start talking. And generally speaking, people like talking about themselves, so they're off.
I tend to avoid just one-on-ones.
Yeah.
I much prefer if there's at least three.
Yeah.
You can deflect.
Yeah. So, lots of different strategies just on networking. Speaking up in meetings, any strategies around that? Anyone?
I practiced it yesterday.
Yeah, go for it.
I just want to raise a few things. Is that all right? It's still a bit permission seeking. It's my way of not trying to talk over other people. But still getting my point across.
Yeah, so actually,
I'd like to just say a few words.
yes.
And Paul.
So prepare people to
Yeah.
listen. Yeah. Because I think one of the challenges I know lots of quieter professionals have is they don't feel heard. And so if you get their attention that way, and I like how you said pause before you start.
Yeah.
What's useful about that?
It braces them to hear me.
Yes.
And not feel like it's a competition to who can talk over who.
Yeah. Sometimes when I speak up in a meeting or even in presentations, I would deliberately slow down because you know the impact when you do. You have to do it strategically. It gets a bit boring if you're slow all the time, right? And I'm conscious that I'm a reasonably slow talker anyway, so I'm conscious of that. But creating the pause or slowing down, those are some useful strategies. One other strategy that I can offer to you, and there's lots of different ones, but one that I use quite a lot, is stop thinking that you have to keep adding to. There's other ways you can contribute as opposed to adding another point or adding a new idea. There's other ways of contributing, like Supporting others, say, oh, you know, Jackie, that was a really great idea. I really want to support you in thinking that, and, you know, this is what I think of it. You're not adding anything in particular, but you're supporting others. It might be, just a thought, especially if there's somebody who hasn't been heard and they spoke, supporting that person is a brilliant contribution you can make, especially as quieter professionals, if you can do it to help each other out. The other is around asking questions rather than, you know, trying to add something in. Others are facilitating. Maybe you can say, was it Colin? Colin, you haven't spoken for a while, I'd love to hear from you, type of thing. Yeah, so there's different ways, and there's many other ways as well. So just a few tips there. So, and then thirdly, adapting purposely for me ends with the presence. And there's I'm sure you've come across Amy Cuddy's work on presence. It's become pretty famous. Who's heard of Amy Cuddy and presence? Yep. So she's written a lot about the outside-in approach to presence, which is about using your physical posture and facial expressions as well to create a confident presence inside. So what it does is, do you want to try? Are you happy to try? Please stand up. So I have my own version of Amy Cuddy's work just because about a year and a half ago, I started doing adult ballet, of all things. My daughter does ballet and I got sucked in. So in ballet, there's that ballerinas have very good posture, right? And so there's a few things in there that I can introduce. One is really standing tall. So if you can lengthen your spine as well as your neck, imagine your neck getting longer and you're being pulled from the top of the crown. Yeah, so wow, you all look taller. So that in itself does it feel a little more powerful or confident in some way, shape or form? Yeah. Amy Cuddy talks about power poses. I don't do them, but she does talk about the Wonder Woman pose. I find it a little fake, so it doesn't quite work for me. I look at more the ballerina sort of pose. But and hands, I know when we're standing, we sort of start to go, where do I put my hands? Have you noticed? Especially when you're in front of a group. This is a tip I heard from the Toastmasters, the winner of Toastmasters quite recently. And he said that if you open your palms that way, it's much more welcoming and it's a more powerful pose or posture. As opposed to, you don't have to do the jazz thing, but just slightly open this way. Yeah, no, not the Trump thing. No, not this one. No. But if you just have a look at this side of the hands first, and then look at this side, can you sense a little bit of a difference in energy? It's a bit of a closed energy versus an open energy. So there is that. Thank you. Please take your seat. There's lots of other things we can do, but we won't. So that's the outside in, and what happens is other people will perceive you in a different way when you can stand tall and the physical aspect of it. But the most interesting part of Amy Cuddy's work is that when you do that, it actually affects your psychology as well. So it's an outside in. The other side of presence is the working on the inside out, and one of the things that I've done to work on my inside out is very much about developing a practice of mindfulness and meditation. I've been doing it for 16 years, and that's really helped me to have a more centered and grounded nature. So there's lots of things you can do from the inside out, and if you work on the outside in. So then you can have a quietly powerful presence that you bring in. And I think Obama will be an example of that. You know, when he walks up onto the podium before he speaks, he's got that presence. And many others who had shown up. And I'm sure some of the quietly powerful leaders in this room also have that. So there's a number of things you could do. So they're my thoughts, and I just wanted to share some of the things I've been working on. I've been doing one-on-one coaching. I've also been doing a virtual group coaching program of late. which I've got a couple of people from Hong Kong and a couple of people from Sydney and a couple of people from, more than a couple actually, a few more people from Sydney and Melbourne. And it's been a lot of fun to have a virtual group coaching thing and going through the appreciate and adapt process, and that's what we're doing at the moment. Another one I've been playing around with is I've partnered up with a voice coach, and he's an expert in voice, so the external voice. And I work on the internal voice, and so we said, oh, why don't we collaborate and work on something on voices? So I've been working on that, primarily in Melbourne at the moment because that's where I'm from. And also I've been working on a membership where people can join in and learn more about what I'm doing, as well as getting access to discounted offerings and things like that. So that's the kind of thing I'm developing. I'm experimenting, so things change, but that's the sort of thing I've been doing. So if any of you are interested in following up and doing all that, please do get in touch. I'd love to hear from you, given that we've had this conversation. And also I write a lot on LinkedIn too, so if you want to follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn, please do. I'd love that also. Because my wish is that you unlock the music inside you, and the more we see the quieter professionals do that, the more we'll see quieter, powerful leaders. And I personally believe at this point in time in the world, we need more quietly powerful leaders. Really do. Just looking at America, we really do. Okay, thank you very much. That's it from me.